Welcome to the BC4LS Talk Series. The Budapest Center for Long-Term Sustainability, the Knowledge Hub Center, the principal objective of the reflect of one of the great challenges in our age, the long-term sustainability, and to create and operate the global intellectual field of force. End of October, we are published the 95 theses for the long-term sustainability. It's a 64-page global debates what is focusing for the long-term sustainability and the comprehensive life-centered world order, including of the new megatrends, the new sustainable economics, the technology, talent, capital and knowledge, the new geopolitical age, and of course, the life-centered and the comprehensive world order. Because we are living of the multipolar world order, the age of fusion, and the three main passwords are sustainability, complexity, and connectivity. We are very glad that today we are welcome and introduce Mr. Abhishur Prakash, the expert of geopolitics and technology. He's a co-founder and the futurist of Center of Innovation of the Future. Born in New Zealand with Indian parents and grew up in Canada and Australia. Abhishur Prakash, the author of the 5 books that explore the future of globalization, the future of geopolitics and technology like artificial intelligence, 5G, and robotization. His first 2 books, The Next Geopolitics, The Future of the World Affairs, Technology Volume 1 and Volume 2. The third book is Go AI, The Geopolitics of Artificial Intelligence, and his new books, The Focusing for the Vertical World, How is the Technology Remaking of the Globalization? Abhishur Prakash is a member of the International Advisory Board of BC4LS. The 3 main questions today of the workshop. Why is sustainability important in our age? What is the connection between technology and sustainability? And how is AI drive our future? I want to ask Mr. Abhishur Prakash to share ideas and vision for the sustainability, technology, and about AI.
Well, thank you very much, Norbert. It's a great honor to be here today. And sustainability is more important than ever before. We're meeting here at a very critical moment where technology is rapidly underpinning everything from healthcare to education to politics and, of course, sustainability. And it's imperative that we seize this moment right now. By 2050, the global population will surpass 9 billion people. There's currently 2.9 billion people without the internet. And by 2030, the global middle class will increase by 1.3 billion people. The only way to ensure a sustainable future is to realize the role that technology can play. But first, let's define what is sustainability. It's not a new word, it's a word that's been around for a long time, and it's a word that everybody has their own definition for. Everybody has their own interpretation. But today, sustainability means something much different. It's more important than ever before. So to define what sustainability means, let's look at what is not sustainability. Let's work backwards. That way we can all be on the same page as to the true challenges and opportunities that sustainability and technology can solve. First, between 2018 and 2019, the global bee population around the world declined by 40%. 40% in 1 year. Now, bees are one of the main sources of pollination. And more than 75% of the world's food crops and more than 35% of the world's agricultural land depends on pollination. And one of the main sources is rapidly in decline. Is this sustainable? Or look at global warming. There's immense challenges that are emerging with fresh water. One of them happened in the Middle East. Between 2006 and 2010, the worst drought in almost 1 millennium hit Syria. And the people that were affected were mainly farmers and those working in the agriculture sectors. And what did these people do? Well, they had to leave their land. And this resulted in protests. And researchers have linked this drought with the civil war in Syria right now. Is this sustainable? So I've created a definition, a holistic definition for sustainability. It's the ability to ensure a certain way of life and an equitable, safe, and stable world for all biological systems. Notice that I didn't just mention for humanity, because the importance of the environment and animals is as relevant to the question of sustainability as humanity is. Now, if we agree about the importance and the priority that sustainability should have in all of our minds, then we have to understand what will drive sustainability. What will make sustainability a success? What is at the core of sustainability now? And that's technology. Any sustainable project around the world, from Budapest to Beijing to Boston, from Singapore to Sao Paulo, any sustainable project will only succeed because and with technology. And in fact, it's Governor Matolci that said that we need smart, new, fair, and globally available sustainable technologies in order to create a long-term sustainable economy and human mankind. And a critical part of what's being said here is globally available, because we're living in the midst of a global fight for technology where countries are no longer necessarily exporting technologies. So we have to ensure that if we want to be sustainable, that technologies are globally available and globally accessible. So if technology now is going to drive sustainability, let's look at what's happening and where things might go next. Microsoft right now is building what's called a planetary computer. And Microsoft is building this by deploying sensors around the world, in the land, in the sea, in the air. And these sensors are collecting massive amounts of data on changing situations in the environment. If there's pollution in the soil, if there's more emissions in the air, if the sea has more plastic accumulating. And all of these sensors are relaying this data back to Microsoft's planetary computer. And the planetary computer is then able to gain insight and awareness into what's happening with climate change and sustainability around the world. The importance here is that for the first time, the world will have real-time insight as to how the global climate is changing. Coffee is the most consumed stimulant in the world. Every day, billions of people consume coffee, and I know many of us are guilty of consuming more than 1 cup of coffee a day. But regardless of what kind of coffee you're having, it's always harvested from coffee beans. Coffee beans are grown around the world, and then they're exported, and they land in our cup. But now, with technology, a new form of coffee is emerging. Scientists in Europe have created coffee not from coffee beans, but they've grown them from coffee cells. This is the same technology and science behind growing meat from cells instead of getting meat directly from animals. So now the global coffee production and how coffee is produced may not be on a farm, but it may be in a lab in a more sustainable way. Energy, renewable energy, if there's one driving force of sustainability, if there's one area where if you ask anybody about sustainability, the first thing that comes to their mind is renewable energy, solar power, wind power. And with technology, this is now being dispersed around the world. China has unveiled a $50 trillion plan to connect the world with renewable energy. They want to build solar farms and wind farms and geothermal plants around the world that can connect entire regions. And this is going to change how energy is used and exported. Instead of the whole world depending on a few energy centers, on a few energy epicenters, now every region may be able to produce energy on their own terms and satisfy their energy needs. There's a big saying in the finance world that when New York goes to sleep, all the investors turn to Tokyo. And Tokyo is in the midst of a massive transformation as a city. Tokyo has announced a plan to become a global capital for green finance. This is finance that's focused on sustainability. And to achieve this, Tokyo has unveiled 2 projects. The first is to start investing massive amounts of capital into green startups. These are startups that are developing green technologies. And the second is to fund companies that are specializing in decarbonization tech. And this is technology, for example, a facility in Switzerland that's been created that can suck carbon out of the air. So now Tokyo, to redefine its future, is focused on finance and sustainability. So we've looked at a few examples of how technology is driving sustainability. But of all the technologies that we hear about, from robotics to quantum computing to the metaverse, the most significant technology that could revolutionize the world is artificial intelligence. AI is being equated with electricity, with fire, because AI is going to reconfigure every sector and every time zone. So let's look at how AI is already starting to drive sustainability and where things could go with AI in the coming years. In Japan, there's a prefecture called the Nagano Prefecture, and they have the objective of achieving what they call a sustainable society. That's their objective. And to achieve this, the Nagano Prefecture has created several different policies. But they're not just legislating these policies. What they've done is they've used AI to run hundreds of simulations as to how these policies might affect the Nagano's society. So instead of policymakers getting together and creating legislation and passing it and hoping for the best, with AI, the Nagano Prefecture can almost test before deploying and see how will society react to these sustainable policies. What will be the impact on business? What will be the impact on climate? In Europe, every year there's a competition held around agriculture. And every year this competition has different teams of humans competing to grow a crop, be it a cucumber, be it a broccoli. This year, this competition took a different route. It pitted a human team against an AI team. And the objective was to grow tomatoes, a yield of tomatoes. And in the end, the AI team won. The AI team not only beat the human team in terms of how long it took to grow the tomatoes, but it used less energy and less water. So when we think about global farming and sustainability, will the next farmers, will the path towards sustainable farming be through AI? Audi, the German automaker, has one of the biggest supply chains in the world. Just like Apple or GE, Audi has spent decades building and perfecting this supply chain. But Audi has now a different goal. Audi wants to make its supply chain sustainable. And to do this, Audi has turned to AI. Audi is using AI to monitor its entire supply chain, every supplier around the world, to find out whether suppliers are being sustainable. And if a supplier is found out in the news or in other realms that they're not doing sustainable things, then Audi can take action. So AI is not just redesigning how supply chains function, but it's actually allowing companies to ensure that their supply chains are sustainable. In Saudi Arabia, the government is building a $500 billion megacity called Neom. It spans 3 countries, and it will be 33 times the size of New York City. At the center of Neom will be AI. AI teachers and other types of algorithms will manage the city. And just recently, Saudi Arabia has announced the first region of Neom called Oxagon. And this is a city that's floating on the water and is 100% sustainable, from how goods are offloaded in ports, to how waste and energy are managed, to how citizens go about their daily lives. And at the center of Oxagon, Saudi Arabia is putting AI, not just to manage the city, but to go one step further, to anticipate what residents might need. And this is very important because AI is not just allowing a city to achieve sustainability, which is one big goal, but to maintain it too. Because you don't want to achieve it and then decline, you want to maintain it or go even higher. SenseTime is a Chinese facial recognition company. They're called the largest facial recognition company in the world. And SenseTime, because they're engaged with facial recognition, which is a type of AI, SenseTime has started building these AI ethics. These are the rules and the parameters that will govern how AI behaves, what decisions AI can make. But SenseTime isn't just approaching this from a commercial point of view. They're approaching this from a very holistic point of view. And they've recently announced their 3 pillars for their AI ethics. The first is that the AI should be controlled, that AI can't go crazy and make decisions on its own and behave autonomously. The second is that AI should prioritize human well-being, that AI should be helping humans. And the last is sustainability. SenseTime is building these AI ethics in order to ensure that whoever is using their AI can achieve their sustainable goals. So algorithms now are being designed from the ground up with sustainability built into them. The mind of AI that will be used around the world will be sustainable from the get-go. So we've looked at a few examples of how technology is driving sustainability, and we've looked at a few examples of how AI and algorithms are already driving sustainability. But let's look at on the horizon. What's on the horizon? What could happen in the near future as AI transforms sustainability? The first is sustainable predictions. Right now in Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, an AI system called CityBrain is managing the entire city. And right now it's focused on transportation, on reducing gridlock and congestion, and hoping that the traffic lights don't result in accidents. But this AI system is becoming more advanced with every passing week. And in the future, this AI system might begin to predict sustainability. What happens if the AI says that emissions in Kuala Lumpur or other cities will go up by 20% next week? Or what happens if we really think radically, if this AI can pinpoint who is responsible for not being sustainable, which neighborhoods are contributing more to waste, which people and groups are causing more emissions? And if this is what AI can predict, how will governments use this prediction? And how will the people who are affected by the predictions that AI is making feel and react? In the US, there's a startup that's launched an index for the Chinese economy. And this index is using satellite imagery to monitor the health of China's economy. So this startup has bought massive amounts of satellite imagery. And with algorithms, it's looking at factories. And it's looking at things like whether the factory has more emissions coming out of it. How long are the lights on? How many workers are entering and leaving each day? How many trucks are entering and leaving each day? And by looking at these things, the AI is able to assess how healthy China's economy is. Now, if we apply this same paradigm to sustainability, then we get a deep monitoring and deep insight into how are other nations being sustainable? How are other nations dealing with sustainability? And are what other nations saying trustworthy? So AI will give countries new powers and new insight and the ability to monitor what the rest of the world is doing as far as sustainability goes. And we need to think both as to how sustainability is changing today, but also what is the new form that sustainability will take in the coming years, what I call Sustainability 5.0. So for instance, right now in Bangkok, certain residents are using AI and blockchain to trade excess energy with each other. So if a household has generated a lot of energy in a given week, at the end of the week, that household can use AI and blockchain to sell that excess energy to somebody else. So now this is technology not just driving sustainability, but actually helping and motivating people and giving people a new kind of livelihood. We all know about these carbon credits that are sold and exchanged between countries. Well, will the next carbon credits through AI be between individuals? Another aspect of Sustainability 5.0 is that Japan has unveiled what they call Society 5.0. And a big part of this is the goal of allowing each person in Japan to control up to 10 robotic avatars. So you could be at home and you could be controlling robotic avatars that are navigating the street and operating in society. So if that is the future makeup of cities, if robots will be the main residents from shopping to transportation to more, how will this affect sustainability? But as we think about sustainability from a very holistic point of view, we need to also look at three key challenges as sustainability takes off in the world and as technologies like AI drive sustainability. The first fundamental challenge and question is, how do we incentivize a country, a company, or a city, or a citizen to be sustainable? Now, we've heard arguments to be sustainable in the past, from don't leave your lights on to don't use plastic water bottles. But these arguments have been around for a long time. We need to start thinking about the new ways that we can enable the world to be sustainable, the new incentives that can jolt people and jolt companies and jolt countries in becoming sustainable. Now, in the BC4LS 95 Theses for Long-Term Sustainability, data is a heavy feature. It's an area, a variable that is going to define sustainability in the coming years and decades. Except if data is the new oil, how do we ensure that the whole world has access to data to become sustainable? Because right now, countries are not necessarily exporting data to one another, they're actually building these data borders. And so a new organization has formed, backed by several governments and several large companies, to almost liberalize data in the world and create what they call free data. So if data is key to sustainability, then opening up the world's data taps is also critical. And lastly, if sustainability is the most important priority for the world, if sustainability is something that we all must take under and focus on, we also have to do it knowing that there are going to be growing pains. And one of them is that as we transition the world into becoming more sustainable, that there are going to be some tensions that emerge. The CEO of Saudi Aramco has said that if we phase out fossil fuels too fast, there's going to be social unrest. So how do we move towards a sustainable future, but ensure that those who may be affected in challenging ways, we can help them too? So I just want to leave you with one thought, which is that when we think about sustainability, it's easy to get siloed into specific areas, but it's critical and it's imperative that all of us think about sustainability from every single angle, because that's the only way we'll realize the spectrum of opportunities that sustainability presents as technology redefines it. Thank you.
Abhishek, thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thank you.
I'm very glad that we are discuss about sustainability, technology, and artificial intelligence. I would like to introduce our guest. I want to show Mr. Fejkis Péter, the Director of Digitalization Directorate, the Central Bank of Hungary. And I want to introduce the Imre Kocsis, Assistant Professor of Budapest of University Technology and Economics, Department of Measurement and Information System. Today we want to focus on the 5 topics and 5 challenges. The first about the climate change and sustainability. The second one is sustainability and connection with technology. The first about the data, infrastructure and sustainability. The fourth issues about the future of education and the link between sustainability. And the fifth about the future of the cities, artificial intelligence, smart cities, digitalization and robotization. So about the first question, the focusing of the climate changing, and even that we are sitting of the John von Neumann room, and even that John von Neumann machine, the satellite machine, so the replicating the space. And I think of the climate change or the biggest challenge our society, how could we use artificial intelligence or other technology to foster sustainability, the compact of the process of the country becoming uninhabitable? What could be the role, even the EU or Central Europe? Peter, what do you think?
Thank you. Actually, it's quite essential question, as Abhishek already mentioned. I think the basic thing is that of course our planet is extremely complex. So therefore, the first thing to make it sustainable or to support sustainability, we have to understand actually the system. So therefore, this is the first thing where AI and machine learning could really help us to better understand the things. For instance, let's just look at the weather forecasts. It's improved a lot actually in the last decades. However, still there are huge uncertainties and other risks. So it could really improve. Basically, I see actually three main areas where AI and machine learning could really help us. Data analytics, predictions and forecasts, as already mentioned in the presentation, and also early warning systems. Let's just give you one example about this. The first thing is that how can we foster innovation using AI? If you look at the example of Albert Szent-Györgyi, for instance, a very famous Hungarian scientist who discovered components of the vitamin C, that or another example is Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb. They had to test a lot of materials, thousands of materials, which could fit and which could work, which could not. During this process, the AI and machine learning could really help us. Another very good example is that how can we support or reduce the energy consumption? Google, for instance, they had a pilot. They had a lot of data centers across the globe, and they used machine learning algorithms to decrease the cooling energy consumption by 30-40%. So it could have a quite significant impact on supporting us actually in the way of having a more sustainable way of living. And maybe the last thing what I would mention is that referred to the idea what Abhishek raised, that the biggest question is that how can we have real initiatives which could support or incentivize people and countries or regions to be more sustainable. And in this process, AI and machine learning could really help us as well. Actually, maybe the role of central bank or EU could be that we are in an optimal geopolitical situation in between Asia and America, and we have also talents and good data quality, and both are quite essential in using AI and machine learning. So therefore, probably it could be a role. I think Central Bank of Hungary is a very good example in that sense that at the Central Bank of Hungary we have a dedicated digitalization directorate, and also the Central Bank of Hungary is the first central bank in Europe which has actually a clear legal mandate for sustainability. So I think this is a good way forward.
And even I think you are talking about the climate change. So the John von Neumann was the first scientist in the world, the Martians. John von Neumann, who make about, of course, the Earth is a global system. So the future of the main question, 1950s years, he wrote about the future of the question of the future. How is the climate can make is like the climate industry can make is the complex system. Imre, how do you think about these questions about the challenge of the sustainability, climate change, and data-driven economics?
Yeah, AI will be most definitely a very important component in the solution which we will hopefully reach and soon. But I would like to emphasize that in order to be able to perform any meaningful collective action, we will need common trust, coordination, and new incentivization schemes in our common stewardship of the climate, if you like. And to this end, now blockchain and distributed ledger technologies seem to be a key component, a keystone technology, if you like. Actually, there are a great number of envisioned schemes, from supporting regenerative agriculture through tracking emissions and actually cross-checking the tracking of emissions of each, to the trading of various green certificates and green bond schemes and the like. We will see when and how these we can implement. What we already have is actually trading of green certificates, which is already something. Now, at the EU level, I'm confident that we will see solutions and policy actions. Actually, the utilization of blockchain for climate action is on the policy list of the EU. Right now, the EU is building out the European blockchain services infrastructure, which is not geared towards green action right now. It's to solve, if you like, easier problems at first. European-wide self-sovereign identity is one of the most important use cases. But I'm very confident that if and when we have this Europe-wide blockchain platform, the climate action applications will arrive too.
Thank you. Of course, your new books about vertical world. So you know, the living of the multipolar world order, but I think is the COVID pandemic is getting for the stronger countries, the stronger nations, because nations solve the problem immediately. So with the sustainable depend of the technology, with the world's need to cooperate sustainability, can country take the independent steps, or the AI is going to drive sustainability, the global fight for AI going to help to hinder this? So what is the main role for the frontier technology like quantum computing, or if you make your presentation of the metaverse play, is the regarding of the sustainability, I'm sure?
Well, the vertical world is resulting in nations using technology to not necessarily plug into the world deeper, integrate deeper, but actually almost hold the world at an arm's length. And so just one example, last year in the Himalayas, there was a skirmish between India and China. And this resulted in tensions flaring between both countries. But India went after China's technology sector. It banned TikTok, it banned WeChat. Now fast forward to 2021. India has a goal, by 2030, it only wants to sell electric cars. So if you want to buy a new car, you can only buy electric. And Tesla is preparing to enter India. But the Indian transportation minister has said something quite interesting. It's told Tesla, we don't want you to sell Chinese-made electric cars in India. So you can see now how, on one hand, India has this goal of sustainability by 2030, only electric cars. But on the other hand, you have now this vertical world, this barriers towards economic integration, where India is saying, well, we're willing to put sustainability on hold in order to ensure national security or economic competitiveness, whatever the argument is. So sustainability is going to have to almost adapt to this vertical geography that's emerging. But at the same time, you're seeing nations use technology to redefine sustainability in their own ways. So Israel is a really great example. Israel has developed desalination technology. This is technology that allows you to take water from the sea, remove the salts, and make it drinkable. In fact, Israel's minister has said that in the coming years, it wants 100% of all tap water in Israel to come from desalination technology. So this creates the question, does Israel still need these global climate accords, or does Israel really need to cooperate on global warming if it can solve these challenges on its own? But then obviously you get to the question of these frontier technologies like quantum, like the metaverse. Quantum computing is not yet mainstream. Quantum computing is still a very niche area. But quantum computing, the ability to crunch unimaginable amounts of data in seconds. I talked about awareness and insight in my presentation. this will take it to a whole new level when countries and companies and cities can see in a historical, in a present, in a future sense, what's happening. And then if you add the metaverse to that, we really need to think about, well, we have this goal of being sustainable by different governments, different countries. But right now, all of these agreements are being negotiated in the real world. Now you have the metaverse coming, and you have Barbados opening up an embassy in the metaverse. So will the next era of sustainable agreements and sustainable diplomacy take place in the metaverse?
Thank you. So this data extremely helpful to give inside the personal customer service automatic process, which extreme amount of data generated innovation solutions. So we are facing for the new challenging for managing for the data. So how we deal with this situation in the terms proper of infrastructure of sustainability, Peter?
Yeah, I think this is really a key question, because if we look at the data, then we can see that, for instance, an autonomous car, it really depends on the automation level of this car, but it could produce 300 terabyte data in a year, and it could be even more if it's at a higher automation level. Let me give you another example. Using smartphones. 10 years ago, there were 700 million smartphones around the world. Now it's more than 6 billion smartphones, and also the data traffic increased rapidly. Actually, it's 260 times higher than it was 10 years ago. So it's a huge amount of data, actually. And therefore, it's quite relevant question that, okay, we have a lot of data, but it requires data centers. The data centers require cooling or heating or whatever. So it's also a burden for the environment. So how can we deal with it? Now, I think this is also an area where AI, machine learning, could help us. I mentioned an example from Google in the last question, or in the last answer, actually, or in the last topic. And we can really see that it could really involve a lot. However, so the challenge is still there. And we have to bear in mind the fact that AI is a tool and not a master. So it could help us, but we have to figure out together with good experts that how can we solve this issue. What we see actually in the banking sector is that on one hand they really want to develop new technologies or using new technologies in a sustainable way usually, and of course the cloud computing and using the cloud instead of on-premise solution, it was really a trend in the last couple of years, and we expect also further increase, although maybe there are other new solutions, and maybe Imre will refer to it as well. But actually the main story here is, or the bottom line here is, that how can we transform the approach of big data to sustainable data, and the challenge is still there, and we have a lot to do.
Thank you. Imre?
Yes, it's a rather complex set of questions. Extrapolating from current trends, I think a key element is an even increasing reliance on hyperscale cloud providers. Again, ceteris paribus, if everything develops as is developing now, which has its own risks, rather serious risks actually, but we can be sure in Google, Amazon, and the like to provide the storage and processing and even AI training capability for the world in the future too. There's a silver lining to that too, actually, because there's a partial move at least back from the data center right now with edge computing technology and 5G, meaning that there are many AI and non-AI applications that require small data centers to be next to your mobile towers, essentially. Just think of augmented reality. And when you hold back part of your data, your AI models, your data value, your data treasure, if you like, back at the edge or in the field, then that still remains yours, and you are not that reliant on hyperscale cloud providers. We will see. This is still very much developing. What is interesting with respect to sustainability is that data is the new oil. Meaning that we are seeing data marketplaces popping up, some of them in a centralized, some others in a decentralized blockchain-based manner, which means that the data generated by your car, the data generated by a smart city, the data generated by a telco infrastructure, this is in itself, this data is money, value. So people are beginning to sell and buy that data. So in a sense, the market will solve the sustainability problem, I think, because if it's an asset to be sold and bought, then we have the technology. Sustainability will iron out itself. I'm just not very confident about the societal aspect of relying on market forces in that respect purely.
Are we sure? What do you think about it?
Well, we need to think about the future of, how data is collected and where it's stored. So there's a projection that by 2025, a majority of the world's data centers will be run by AI. So if that is, the direction that we're moving in, where AI will manage data centers, is it managing it because it's more affordable for companies, or is it managing it because it can manage energy consumption better? Because while that may be the projection, there's also, as was mentioned, that some companies are experimenting with putting these data servers, which consume massive amounts of energy, which get really hot in the oceans, right? So how is all of this going to kind of play a role? Also, edge computing was mentioned. Edge computing is the ability of instead of relying on a centralized server somewhere, you have those computing capabilities in your pocket. And so if that is how the next generation is going to function, where they're going to have these powerful computers in their pocket or with their glasses, how will that affect sustainability? But I think a really critical area to think about are the new forms of data storage that are emerging. So for example, scientists are looking at storing data in the DNA of people. So if that now becomes how the current generation or the next generation stores their data, even if it's just the most critical and sensitive data to them, then that also is going to have an impact on sustainability when you look at how these now biological systems are affecting data storage and how that's affecting sustainability.
Yes, we're living of the age of technology, what is very interesting. So it's even so many megatrends is starting. We're just thinking about the multifunction home, the smart cities, digitalization, robotization, artificial intelligence, how this is important. And of course, it's a change for education for even the post-COVID era. So how do you see the future of education? So what is the understanding technology and infrastructure could be leveraged to have more inclusive, efficient and sustainable education system? And how could modern education reach the society is looking for in education? Peter?
Yeah, actually, it has a huge potential, and also there are a lot of risks. So, for instance, I see that AI could really help the way of education. So the way of education will change, and the accessibility, and also the production of educational processes will also change. So access and the way of how it's produced. Let me give you a few examples. So using AI, the whole educational process could be much more personalized, tailor-made, high quality. It could be some individual tutors sitting actually virtually behind our children, due to the fact that it could analyze actually the learning patterns and the learning activities, and the algorithms will be able to adapt to this, and they will optimize actually the whole learning process in order to maximize actually the learning outcome of the individual students. And it will be fully tailor-made. It really depends on if a child is much better in the morning learning, math, then they will put actually math tasks to them. If another one is much better, in the afternoon, then they could adapt. So this is one thing. The other one is the communication. We can see in the last couple of years that actually everybody who has a child is an expert on Teams and Google Classrooms and all of these features. So we can see that it could really work. And it's what was quite surprising for me is the speed of adoption. Even in less developed countries, the speed of adoption to this remote teaching was quite remarkable. So this is the second thing, and it's also very important that they have to learn to communicate not only with each other in a virtual space, but they have to also learn to communicate with robots and computers, because in the future this is how it works. This is how we will work actually, together with robots and together with AI, possibly. And maybe a third part is that the accessibility. So due to the AI, the governments will be able to really increase the reach of education. Let me just mention two risks. The first one is that although it could really support the educational inclusion, but digital exclusion could be also a big challenge. So if there are a lot of students who are not able to get an access to digital platforms, then they will not, able to use these new technologies, and they will not be able to learn a lot of things digitally. So this is one risk, and maybe the other one is about the ethics. So the ethical question is generally very important in using AI and machine learning. However, in the case of education, it could be even more important. So therefore, probably there is a need to set up a few rules and basic principles how use AI in educational process.
I think it's very important because when we are writing about the 95 theses of the 21st century, the long-term sustainability, there is the point what is focusing on knowledge, talents, technology, and capital. So what's very important. It's a very interesting that you made about the tailor-made high quality. I think even the children they are a creative genius. So I think it's before of the COVID, so 2019 it was the age for digital nomads, but in the future, the post-COVID era, it's filled with digital talents. So what do you think, Abhishur, about is the talent, the technology, talent, capital, and knowledge? It's will shaping the world, or how is it changing?
Sure. Just to build on what Peter said, I think that as far as the education system goes, then there's kind of two areas we have to look at. The first is that AI will enable new forms of education. So just one data point, around 80% of students in China are in schools are engaging with some kind of AI. What that means, it could be different. But as AI advances and you have AI teachers, that's really going to change things. And it leads to, again, a question of digital exclusion, which is that the world has extremely high hopes for AI. But what if these AI education systems or AI healthcare systems are actually just rolled out for the general population, and that the human education and the human healthcare is for those that can afford it? So we need to think now about kind of inequality through the lens of sustainability and technology. And the second part is that as far as the education goes, we need to start thinking about the curriculums that we're teaching the next generation. Should sustainability be a course subject just like math and science? Or in the workplace, should a worker's bonus be tied to how sustainable they are? So these are fundamental questions, and then obviously you can get into, what do you teach as far as a sustainable curriculum goes? Do you teach about geoengineering? Do you teach about AI-driven sustainability? It's very broad. But nonetheless, we are in the midst of a global talent war. And right now, this war is for critical talent, semiconductors, AI, computer scientists. There's a small number of these people, and the whole world is competing for them. Except because technology is now the center of sustainability, these people are also going to get caught in this global fight for talent. So whatever these people are building, whether it's sustainable materials, sustainable farming, sustainable finance, or green finance, these individuals, these companies are have to start navigating these new fault lines that are emerging because there is rivalry. And it's not just between countries. If you look at Silicon Valley right now, technology companies are in what they call a talent war between themselves. So this is a big challenge that has to be solved.
What do you think about the future, like digitalization, the talent war? Even I think for universities will be the more and more important. So what do you think about the future of education by the university's viewpoint?
Yeah, my vision is actually doubly blinded, if you like, because I educate and I also have children. My personal impression is that we are only at the beginning of the road right now. So what we see is that we have the tools at the high end as AI and at the more mundane end of things as having simply remote classes and the like too. How we can use these efficiently from a pedagogical point of view, that's not clear yet. So maybe, and again that's a personal opinion, we should have a very hard look, possibly AI assisted look at the way we do teaching and assess topic by topic what we do, that what should we focus on with human workforce and what can be left to automated education, if you like, which has its promise. It's just not a panacea.
Of course, AI is not just only focusing for education, the infrastructure, sustainability, but I think is how, as Richard Ford said, one of the most decision in our life is where we are living. So I think it's focusing of the cities, because I think of the cities, the future by the sustainability, digitalization, smart solution, and even of the AI, it will be a big challenge. So it's with the rising use of connected device of automated system or homes or in urban infrastructure, we can expert solve our everyday task easier. So what do you think about the smart city concept? So you are in your presentation make about the neon on Oxagon, or we can follow of Songdo in South Korea, Dubai, Singapore, so many Shenzhen, so many smart city solution. So what do you think about the smart city concept for the future? What level of automatization would be the livable for you, and what could be the advantage for developing of the smart cities of the different countries? Abhishek.
Well, when we think about a city today, we think about it having a certain level of infrastructure, a certain amount of services, and regardless of what time zone the city is located in, every city is trying to go to the next level. And to do that, it needs technology. So the argument could be made that every city, whether or not they have a plan, is on a path to becoming a smart city. But the question in my mind is, technology fundamentally gives everybody new opportunities. As far as the geopolitical side goes, countries are no longer defined by their geography or their history. They can use technology to do things they couldn't do before. And the same applies for AI. So if a city wants to be a smart city and wants to achieve this through AI, then what will be their focus area? For example, in British Columbia, in Canada, the researchers used AI to create new medicines, or in North America, it's called drugs. And so the researchers applied AI. The AI came back with 9 million designer drugs. So if that is what AI can produce, then different cities are going to have different industries. So you're going to have some cities focused on pharmaceuticals, some cities focused on law enforcement, some cities focused on manufacturing. So you're going to have very different city-based designs because of AI. But there's also a big challenge here. I mean, if that kind of technology gets into the hands of the wrong people, then they may not produce medicines, but actual illegal substances. So now you have to think about, how is that sustainable? But also at the same time, what kind of AI offerings will there be in cities? So Dubai, for example, has purchased from China an AI avatar. And it wants this AI avatar to tell the news. So China right now has AI as the news anchors. And this AI looks like the real news anchor, but it's actually AI telling the news. And Dubai has bought this because it wants AI to tell the news in Arabic. So if that's the level of automation, that's the level of AI integration, I think some of us would be okay with that. But now, and this goes back to sustainability, if you have some cities that are completely governed by AI to the point where humans are losing jobs, where humans are not being employed, where you have now AI bias emerging, whether it's in predictive policing systems or in the offering of healthcare, then that's not sustainable. And so these are serious social, economic, ethical issues. And unfortunately, there is no global strategy for that. So it's up to cities and countries to navigate this on their own.
Peter?
Yeah, actually, it's quite important to bear in mind that currently 55% of the global population is living in cities, and it will increase dramatically in the next couple of years. So, for instance, in 2050, based on the UN estimation, it will be 68% or something like that. So it's a huge amount of people, and therefore very important to tackle this issue, that how can we make cities much more sustainable. Although actually cities were always in the center of the technological development. So if we consider, for instance, the Roman times, the water supply solutions, or the public transport in the beginning of the 20s or the end of the 19th century, somehow the technology was around the cities. I think the current situation is a bit different, because now it's not only individual smart solutions are there, but it's also interconnected. So basically, for a smart city, you need actually three important things. First, devices, which could actually collect data. The other one is that you have to collect data, so there should be a storage for that. And the third one is that the policymakers should provide new solutions for the citizens, which they can use actually, and therefore they can really they could really benefit from the smart city concept. So what we see in Barcelona or in a lot of other cities, that it could really increase the efficiency of the public services. Garbage sensors, parking lot sensors, managing healthcare, predicting weather or crowd issues or pandemic, for instance. So there are a lot of very very good solutions for that. However, there are also a few risks, as also Abhishek mentioned. So for instance, cybersecurity threats. If everything is measured and everybody is measured, then, and it's also located somewhere, all of these data, it could be quite dangerous. And the other one is the privacy and hyper-surveillance issue, that if it could be some challenges with the human rights, and also who owns the data question. So therefore, I think there is a very very interesting initiative in Europe, the Decode concept, which is piloting actually in Barcelona and in Amsterdam, where all of the citizens could decide whether they will share their data for the smart city and make the city smarter, or they would hold it actually in privacy. There are a lot of technological questions could come up actually, and also a lot of policy questions. But I think this could be a quite interesting area. So we will see in that sense. What is sure that every city will be smarter, as Abhishek put it, and probably in the future we do not have to think about cities. We will have to think about regions. So smart regions could be there. Because we can see actually the same trend also in Asia and also in Europe, and probably also in the US.
Thank you very much. Imre?
Thank you. I would like to underline one thing in what you said, that you didn't put it this way, but for me this is one of the main messages, that a smart city initiative or implementation does not have to be repressive. It doesn't have to go the dystopian way. As a matter of fact, if you look at the smart city literature, one of the key use cases, if you like, is increasing the cohesiveness of local communities, support for local democracy, making decision-making at a city scale more distributed and more equitable. It's technology. The question is how we use that. If someone is at home with a broken leg, if there's robust smart city technology, they can be monitored from afar, certainly, that's very good. But if there's elections, they can possibly take part in their local and wider democratic processes from home in a meaningful and trustworthy way. So there are a plethora of solutions, and it can be a powerful way to increase the power of communities and democracy too. The other thing is that smart cities, I think for many cities, will have to happen, period, if we look at sustainability. I think the smart city program of Berlin starts basically with the fact that we will grow twice as big as we are right now in a few decades. What to do to sustain our current level of functionality, as your definition of sustainability so aptly puts it. So it has to happen, and what we don't talk enough about is maybe that smart should also mean resilient. So in a world of changing economies and changing climates, making cities more resilient, less fragile than they are right now is important. And a way towards that can be smart city infrastructures.
I think the fragility is not just only for the cities, but all the planet is important. So this is the occasion when we start to discuss for talking of with the climate change for the complex system. So I think even with the cities of the future for a smart solution is very important, together with how the city will be the livability, technological adapted, data-driven city. So I think is the future, even the European, Asian and other cities is having together to work by the universities, technological part or data centers and the cities is together. And of course I agree that the connection is very important. So the cities connections, maybe we can call the region and all the future. So it's like start with the local. And I think for sustainability, for the long-term sustainability, the first step we have to change the way of thinking. So this is the first very important step, and this is the occasion that we are very happy and very glad that we are talking together to the sustainability, technology and the future of artificial intelligence. So Abhishur, thank you very much. Peter, Imre, thank you very much to being us. Thank you very much everybody. And of course in our 95 thesis for the long-term sustainability can download from our homepage, the BC4LS.com. So thank you very much to being with us and see you next time. Thank you.